Welcome to the second virtual and 8th annual Raise Your Hands Against Racism event. We've been doing this event since 2015, inspired by the Festival of Colors, Holi. In today's event and entire program, we are very pleased because we've included 3 or 4 different items in today's program. Number one, we are very pleased that the Premier of British Columbia has sent his personal message. We are very pleased that we will be introducing the Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism, Rachna Singh, who is in our studios today with us. We are also very pleased that we will be honoring 2 people who will get the award for Raise Your Hands Against Racism for their hard work to eradicate racism and prejudice, discrimination. We are also very pleased that in today's program, we will have students of L.A. Matheson Secondary School giving their messages. I am very pleased that my co-host in this program is Gurpreet Singh, who has been instrumental in bringing Raise Your Hands Against Racism and give it a totally different look to it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism, Rachna Singh. Rachna ji, you're most welcome in our program.
Always a pleasure to be here, Sushma ji. So thankful to be here with you.
Well, the mere fact that you are the Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism, I always feel that people who are immigrants to this country are the ones who feel racism. And we have felt racism. We've lived in different countries. I want to ask you about your experience. Have you ever faced racism?
Yeah, Sushma ji, and I can say the same thing for you. All of us have endured racism in one form or the other. And I really want to give your example when you came to Canada and started working in this society, when there was blatant racism, like black and white racism, as we call it, which was not subtle. And you experienced that.
That's right.
And when I came, like pioneers like you had paved the way for us, like things were much better. We were living in the so-called multicultural society. We had our representatives, whether in legislature or in parliament. We were doing very well economically, financially, as a community. But the racism has been in Canada, is in Canada, and it is very deep-rooted. It's embedded. A lot of times people see it when I talk about your experiences, when people would just say to you, like, we don't want you here, or go back home, go, you Paki, you Hindu. Those things we don't get to see too often now. I won't say that those don't happen, but they are not as common as they used to be in like 60s or 70s or in 80s as well. But the systemic racism, the racism that is within our systems is very prevalent. Immigrant community, like people like us, experience it in the form of microaggressions. But racialized communities as such, like even if they are not immigrant, they are black communities. We know the racism happening with the indigenous communities has been going for ages. And that's what I think we should be focusing on, the systemic racism in our society. Right?
You know, Rachna ji, there are different kinds of racism. There's different kind of discrimination and prejudices. And we all have faced it. We've all looked at it. But the bottom line here is that we should be inclusive. We should look at everybody with respect. We have to, as you mentioned, equality is most important. And so keeping that in mind, gender discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination should all be eliminated. And in today's program, we've got students from L.A. Matheson Secondary School, and I think they have some fantastic messages that we need to give to all our viewers and get them to understand that racism starts at home. And parents perpetuate it. Maybe knowingly, maybe not knowingly.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I want to take this opportunity and thank you for participating in our program and always being there for us and promoting this event.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to be here, Sushma ji. It is always, I'm so glad that you have been organizing this campaign. You started doing it when people were not talking about racism. Like
That's
people
right.
used to say, as I said, everything is fine, we are living in a great society. But starting this campaign and bringing out this very deep-rooted issue and continuing with it, we are so thankful to you. And here is also the message from the Premier of British Columbia.
Greetings, everyone. Premier John Horgan here. Racism remains a scourge online, in our communities, and on our streets. Even as we recover from the pandemic, some try to use hate and bigotry to divide us, and that is unacceptable. We are a multicultural society, and we must stand together against racism and prejudice. No one should ever have to be worried about feeling unsafe because of racism. We want British Columbia to be a more just province for everyone. Today, I join the many people taking part in the 8th annual Raise Your Hands Against Racism Awareness campaign. Thank you to Shushma Dat and Spice Radio for bringing us together. It's always the right time to promote a message of peace and tolerance. Thank you to everyone. Let's keep working together.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to our 8th annual Hands Against Racism event. I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Nazia Niazi, who is a family physician, and she's a hijabi Muslim woman who has faced racism and has amazing story to tell. She has been part of this campaign. She joined us in one of our conversations on radio, and here is her story.
Dr. Niazi, thank you for coming into our program.
Thank you for having me.
As a person who wears a hijab and looks different from other people, have you personally ever felt racism towards you?
There are a lot of assumptions that are attributed to hijab, and in many parts, and there's a misconception that it's a sign of oppression. And in my case, it was a sign of empowerment. It was me deciding how I feel as a person and what would best represent me. And all that turmoil and all that decision making was taking place within me. And of course the world didn't notice. So one day when I come down the stairs wearing a hijab, the first person to notice was my mom. And he goes, "What's this?" And I said, "Well, I decided yesterday and I went and got myself a hijab, and from today onwards I'm going to wear it." And so there was an element of surprise. My mom, being mom,
Yes.
would like me and love me regardless.
Yes.
But I noticed, you know, my patients were surprised, my friends were surprised. I noticed the differences when I go to the grocery store.
So was there a difference in their attitudes?
I am fortunate because of my place in the community as a physician.
Yes.
But I do see a lot of other people, a lot of my patients. I work at in a clinic in Surrey, and we cater specifically to refugee population where a lot of people are from Middle East and wear a hijab. And with them, I have seen the struggle of this outward expression of independence and what they face in this community with their eyes and mine.
Wow. So for me and for our viewers, a definition of why a woman should be wearing a hijab and what importance does it have for you?
Well, it's my choice to take control of how I choose to present myself. So whether that is by wearing a hijab or by, you know, coloring my hair a certain way,
Yeah.
or, you know, having a semblance of my cultural background, I get to choose that and nobody else. So I think that was empowering.
Right.
I think that I have the right to shift the focus from my outwardly appearance to something that is more substantial within myself and my personality and what I want to do in life.
Right.
So it was kind of blurring that outward outline and saying, okay, you know what? To know me, you'll need to know me. You cannot get to decide who I am just by looking at me.
Why does hijab have such a negative connotation? Where does that come from?
It's misrepresentation by people who do not understand it, by lack of understanding. It's by people assuming that that's what it represents without making the effort
To understand
the perspective of the people who are making that choice.
So what does hijab really mean to you?
To me, first and foremost, it's a symbol of my religion, and,
Right.
and that's because you see mostly Muslim women wearing it. It is a sign of modesty. But to me, it's a sign of independence and empowerment, because it is my choice. It is my choice to decide how I represent myself and what face I present to the world.
When you hear about people against hijab, or in Montreal, for example, or Quebec, as a person of that particular religion, community, does it anger you?
I find it ridiculous. I think it's, for the lack of a better word, ignorant and stupid. It is not just my right to wear a hijab, but it also is the right for anybody else to self-represent, whether they are wearing a cultural outfit, whether they are choosing to dress a certain way, whether it's about their sexual orientation. It is basically, any of that is against personal individual rights, because it's about wearing a turban, right? So that in a country like Canada, I just fail to understand. It's just, I'm totally lost. I cannot even fathom that why anybody would feel that they have the right to monitor somebody's choice of dressing. Because at the end of the day, it's just a piece of fabric wrapped around somebody's head. It doesn't really hold any power.
Dr. Niazi, when you see someone being discriminated against, would you stand up and take the place of that person and voice their discomfort, or would you just stay behind?
Now?
Yes.
Totally. When I didn't wear a hijab, I didn't have the courage. I don't know. And I think I've grown as a person from a naive, younger version of myself to an older, more
Defiant.
empowered,
Yes.
and loudmouth person. And being a physician too, I'm an advocate for people I care for. So in my advocacy role as well, not speaking out is wrong. And this life that I'm going to live only once, I do not want to have that on my record.
Thank you so very much.
My name is Zander Sidhu, and I'm in grade 12.
Social justice. Explain to me, what is social justice?
Social justice is basically, I didn't come up with this, so I will not say it too well, but basically it's about first teaching people what is justice in the first place, and how far we've come with humanity from very little to very big, and we know that we all are different, but we all are the same at the same time, which is what's important in all of us, and it's just basically bringing people together and explaining things and being there for each other.
In your day-to-day life, do you practice that?
Yeah, definitely. Me and my friends, we always talk about like social issues and everything that's happening every day, and it's nice conversations, and we have debates and everything, like all friendly things, and it feels good to have talks about that.
So now, if I was to look at you and I was not socially conscious person, I would say, hey, look at that boy, long hair, uncapped, he looks like a girl. Would that be appropriate statement?
Yeah, definitely.
And do people say that to you?
Definitely, yeah.
And how do you react?
I've had that since I was in grade 9 when I first came to Canada, and it was really bad. I remember like having real like breakdowns literally, but then I slowly grew up, and now I'm in grade 12, and now I understand, like, you know what, I can explain it to some people and some I can't, but it's about how I let it affect me and how much I contribute to the society that doesn't let this happen more often. So
Many people think that racism and discrimination is learned at home. How do you feel about that?
yeah, it's definitely learned at home. Like if you have like certain parents who are like close-minded or something, but then again we also must remember that the internet exists, and internet also influences people, and it can't come from anywhere, like from your friends, from yourself, if you're like looking at weird things or whatever. It can come from anywhere, but definitely when you're like much younger, like a toddler, or like you in like 11 years old, it definitely can come from your parents.
And that has a lasting effect?
Yes, like lasting effect, as in it can like literally cause like hate crimes, which is the worst thing that can happen when you're taught these things. And also you can have that mindset till you're like grown up and you're like really old, and you're teaching that to your own kids, like Hayden said.
Now, you came here when you were older, right?
I came here when I was 13, 14, something, yeah.
And where were you born?
I was born in United Arab Emirates.
So life different totally there?
Yeah, extremely. It was like chaotic when I first came here. I was really confused.
What was the thing that you liked the most about this place?
Definitely about how inclusive everything is. I remember first learning about even the GSA club at our school, and I was like really happy and fascinated. And I saw people have those pride pins on their bags, and it made me like, for the first time ever, this was the first time I ever had seen representation for my community, and I remember even crying about it, honestly. It made me really happy, and it feels nice to even be in a room like this where there's so much like, people are like standing up for things here, you know? It feels nice. So yeah, it makes me happy.
How would you, if you were faced with a hate crime, how would you react?
I have experienced something like that before. It's been bad, especially at the school it happened, and I had someone call me the F slur and call me a girl multiple times, and it was really horrifying and bad, and I still am not over it, because it just makes me really anxious when I see whoever did that. But I'm getting over it, and I tell myself, you know what, maybe they're a better person now, and I see them every day, and I'm getting better at this. But the way I handled that, I didn't handle it properly at all. I was just crying and like shaking and stuff. But now if someone did that to me, I would talk to them and like explain, why would you do that, blah, blah, blah. Because I don't care about myself in specific, but I care about how they treat other people and how whatever that person will do after that, you know. If I've been to the same thing, why would I not help others, you know? If I understand the pain or whatever.
Zander, your name is beautiful. Where does it come from?
It doesn't come from anywhere. Thing is, I'm trans. I'm a trans man. I was born a girl.
Yes.
It explains a lot. But I named myself Zander, and it was when I first found out about what trans meant. I had only internet friends, and they were only white people, honestly, and they were from like UK and stuff. And I just picked the name Zander, and I stick with it. And people have asked me to change it and stuff sometime, but I really don't want to, because I've had it for like years now, and yeah. It's just something that like really speaks to me, I would say. Yes.
When your parents found out about your sexual orientation, how were they towards you?
At first they were really concerned and confused. I don't blame them, because this was the first time they even heard it in like it's an actual thing perspective, because we come from India, right? And transgender being in India is like completely different than what it actually is and how the media portrays it. But slowly, when I started like seeing therapists and stuff for my mental health in general, they explained it to my mom and dad, and they slowly understood, and now they're very supportive. And I got to transition medically too. So yeah, I'm definitely like somewhere better than like where I was in grade 9. So.
In an era of climate justice or climate change, it's very important to talk about environmental racism. Very rarely people talk about it. And one of those rare voices is Donna Clark, an educator, a teacher, who will be joining us now to talk about environmental racism and why it is important to talk about it.
Thank you for coming, Donna. I wanted to talk to you about our project and your feeling about environmental racism. When you say there is environmental racism, what do you mean by that?
Thank you for having me, Shushma. I'm mostly of Scottish heritage.
Right.
So when I think of environmental racism, first and foremost, I think of where I am on unceded Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh lands. And having lived so close to the Tsleil-Waututh Reserve and people there for so long in North
Right.
Vancouver, and knowing now that Tsleil-Waututh means people of the inlet. They used to be called Burrard Band, but they renamed themselves their original name.
Right.
People of the inlet. And realizing how important Burrard Inlet is to the Tsleil-Waututh people. And then as a settler, as a European settler here, third generation, thinking about that and thinking about how the Tsleil-Waututh have said to me and to us that that's their sacred obligation.
Right.
And so if I'm going to be a good visitor or a good guest or a good settler living here, it becomes my obligation to uphold that
Yes.
law.
Yes.
And so as a human, as a person here, I would like to honor their sacred obligation and that law for them, and also be respectful and take care of the lands and the waters. But bigger than that, Shushma, I'm a human. I'm just a human being on this planet. And it's come to my understanding in later years, maybe I was a bit slow, that as a human, that's also my sacred obligation on this planet, is
Right.
to look after the lands and waters and the humans that are here with me, and the animals and the birds, and all life is sacred. And what is a bigger commitment than to caretake
Yes.
one another and the lands and the waters, including the lands and waters. So, but I am here. And so I am here on Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam land. So what that has meant to me is how I've taken it, and there's so many different ways of taking environmental racism in this context that I'm setting up for where I am and where I live and what my obligation is and what my commitment is. For me, it has been first and foremost in the last many years opposing the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And when I think of environmental racism, I think of the threat that the Trans Mountain Pipeline that comes through Burnaby here,
Yes.
and then at the moment they are boring through Burnaby Mountain, a big hole through Burnaby Mountain, and it will come out on the other side to Burrard Inlet. And then there's proposed, it will never happen, Shushma.
All right. Not in our lifetime.
Not in anyone's lifetime.
Okay.
It will never happen.
Okay.
But the Trans Mountain Pipeline is proposing to have a mega tanker a day come into Burrard Inlet, which is actually a very shallow inlet.
Right.
So right across the inlet, where the Tsleil-Waututh's story of their origin is that the inlet is their mother, and they were born out of that inlet. So right across that inlet, their mother, there's a proposed huge expansion of a port that comes right out into the water, into the inlet, and then an enormous tanker a day. We don't have that many tankers coming in there now, and we don't have that tankers that are that big
Coming in,
now
right.
coming into the inlet. So so in honoring where I am, and I support the Tsleil-Waututh in their saying no to the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And that's environmental, that's what environmental racism is to me, the imposition of something that is of an industry, of an extractive industry that has the potential to further destroy the lands and the waters of the Tsleil-Waututh people. And that their wish, even though their lands are unceded, they've never willingly given up their lands and their waters.
Yes.
Their wish is not being respected at present.
It's time to move forward. We now would like to share some wonderful moments from the past. You can say blast from the past. In the past, we have been organizing Hands Against Racism events out in the public. Because of COVID-19, we are strictly confined to online event. Hopefully, we'll be coming back next year with a full blast. But right now, we are going to share some wonderful memories of the performing artists. Here we go.
Those claps going.
Every year, as part of our campaign Hands Against Racism, we honor distinguished individuals who have done an amazing work in terms of raising awareness against racism and discrimination. One of those rare voices in our community is Annie Ohana, a famous anti-racism educator and activist. She's also known as a strong voice for human rights and social justice. She will be joining Sushma ji now with her story.
Thank you for taking time, Annie, to come and talk to us.
Anytime, always.
So, Mustang Justice, I like the
Yeah.
name. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, simply enough, I'm a high school educator, and Mustangs are our mascot from L.A. Matheson Secondary. When I started there, pretty much within that first year, I thought there was a need for our kids to kind of explore justice issues more. There were behaviors that were kind of interesting in terms of queer phobia, other things, right? But I thought, well, okay, so let's start trying to teach leadership in a different way. I didn't invent that, obviously, but like the idea that, you know, what if they work towards justice? And the idea of connecting it to our school. We're an inner city school. It's a beautiful school, but also
the idea of like, how do we change our reputation? How do we kind of stand up in our community and act as people that believe in justice? So it's pretty simple overall, but it's been, 8 years now. And yeah, just going strong. And every year new students join and they start their journey, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
So is it a club within a school?
Yeah, it is. It's a club within a school, but yeah, and it's not a nonprofit yet or anything like that. Just, we're just operating within the school district. But like, we definitely go into the community, and that maybe is something that is a little bit more unusual, right?
Why did you start that? Was it something that you saw and then you envisioned? Or?
Yeah, I teach things like law and social studies and social justice, and I'm the Indigenous graduate advocate, and I just thought, like, how do we connect the community to this? Or we see, like in our community, we see it. There's a lot of injustice. So do you play the victim, right? Or at least get victimized? Or do you kind of fight back? Do you talk about these issues? Do you, do you celebrate your identity? So it was this vision of seeing kids, like talking about whatever they wanted to talk about. It could be something personal. It didn't have to be something personal.
Right.
But also that our youth don't have to wait to get to university. They don't have to wait to like get a position of power. They can use their privilege of a free education to talk about those issues. And also being mindful that our system needs a lot of changing. Education is not perfect. So why not like go from the inside and kind of use education to push for these changes?
Our project, Raise Your Hands Against Racism. We just use the word racism, but it also encompasses discrimination, bullying, discrimination on basis of race, color, creed, sexual orientation, and all that. Have you ever been discriminated against because of your race?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. So I'm white passing. I'm a Sephardic Jew, which means like an Arabic Jew from Morocco. My family are people of color, right? There's some of us that are fair, but I have a lot of like brown, what you consider brown family members. My family's moved around a lot, so they're immigrants, right? I was born in Montreal. They speak multiple languages. So unfortunately, growing up, I had a number of things happen. So like being put into speech therapy when I arrived to Vancouver, because having an accent would not allow me to get a job. I still remember that. And I spoke French. Like I didn't speak Hebrew or Arabic. My parents did. I spoke French. I moved down to Florida for high school, and there I was put into like the lowest level English classes, like almost ELL, just not quite, because they just thought, oh, like you come from somewhere else, your family looks this way, you must not be educated. And there's been other things, right? And certainly I'm very proud of my identity. I like to celebrate it. I like to put it out there. But the second you say that you're not fully Canadian in the sense of like many generations, people start to question right away. Oh, your English is so good, right? Oh my God, your dad is so dark. Like it's fascinating, the little things that come out of people. So like sometimes are hard, like there are other situations I could talk about, but generally speaking, those microaggressions, like they add up. And it's something that I see with my students, because most of my students are BIPOC students, and they have the same experiences as I did, and worse.
With 8 years behind Mustang Justice, have you seen a difference?
It's 2022, right? March 2022, and we're still back to that very old conversation. So I do see some good things. Certainly I think we're elevating Black, Indigenous, people of color, but there's a lot more to go.
So in our lifetime, I think we'll never eradicate.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. I think all humans are fallible, right? We all make mistakes. Prejudice is back here. I always say that because people go, oh, racism, racist. I'm like, okay, well, put that aside for now, right? Like the reality is we're conditioned a certain way. There will always be something that you think is different, right? It's just, it's the way we are. So can we work on it? Absolutely. I think the reality is, can we bring it to a point where it's not as violent, right? Can it be a situation where you're not seeing things like enslavement and residential schools and just like, concentration camps and wars? Like, can we get it to a point where it's more a conversation where maybe I'm not a trans person, I don't know that experience, I can talk to someone about it rather than say, trans kids shouldn't use washrooms, right? Like there's a way to do this that we can hopefully like de-escalate the differences, right, and how we talk about it.
This is a topic that cannot be dealt with within an hour.
No.
Or this show.
Yeah.
But I'm very hopeful that with what you're doing, you are at least bringing awareness. And we have selected and chosen you to be the recipient of our award.
That's, oh my God. I stand on the shoulders of giants, you know what I mean? Like it's the students, everybody. Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
So Annie, this is the award
so
that we would like
much.
to give you.
Oh my goodness.
And I hope I have,
So beautiful.
you know, this is something that is very close to our heart, right? And we feel,
Yeah.
I mean, we are nobody to give awards or say that, you know, we think you deserve this. From whatever we've been doing for the past 8 years, we feel that the work that you're doing is so important because you're talking to the kids. And thank you for letting us in your school and letting us talk to the kids.
Absolutely. And you know, I've known about your entire 8 years, right? I've followed it, and I always felt it's so genuine, it's so real. When you were in our school recently, the depth you went to was amazing, and we don't always see that. I think it's very easy, you know, people say, right, I'm not racist. Well, no, you know, like you have to really practice that. You really have to go deep. And not that we don't make mistakes, but rather like, I don't know, I look at journalism, I look at what you're doing, and I see a depth to it that is really special. And I think if anything, this represents our students. This represents so much, right? More than me, right? Whoever I am. But rather the importance of we need to stick together and we need to celebrate people because, like I tell my kids all the time, activism's not easy. And people don't usually clap for you. And you could face some really bad repercussions, right? Like I say criminalization, like there are teachers that leave the profession because they're not seen, you know, you're a troublemaker. Why do you keep bringing up questions, right? So I'm very honest with my students about that. I'm like, of course it's good. And you should be celebrated. You're not always going to be, especially when you're maybe going against the government or something like larger. So these things do matter, I think. And I know I celebrate my kids all the time. I celebrate my colleagues who are doing amazing work. So why not, in a way? Because like white supremacy's been doing it for a long time. So why not? You know, why not we do it? So thank you so much. I have no idea, and we hope to do much more. Right? That's the goal. Yeah,
we do. Partners.
Yeah, always.
My name is Hayden Stephen McLean.
And Hayden, you're in what, grade 11, 12?
Grade 12.
What are you most passionate about?
What I'm most passionate about, probably helping people, seeing a smile on people's face. That if I know I made someone's day, it makes my day.
And have you done that recently? Do you do that every day?
I try to do it every day. I try every day to just make myself better and make everyone around me feel a little better, at least, you know. That comes with the peer tutoring. I volunteer at Prince Charles every Wednesday. It's a program called Sticks and Stars. Basically, just I help organize stuff like that. It's basically just like a athletic program for grade 7 and below.
Now, when you hear the word racism or discrimination or bullying, what are your thoughts on that?
Obviously not great thoughts. It's just awful that people will look at someone without knowing who they are, what they stand for, and simply based on whether they're a guy or a girl, whether they're white or black, make judgments without even like knowing their character.
Have you ever seen that in your own time here at the school or outside?
I have, unfortunately, I have. I haven't faced it myself. I'm privileged to say that, but I've seen my sister. She's obviously a girl. I've seen her face like harassment from her peers at her school. I've seen my friends face discrimination, and it's awful. I hate it.
When you look at that, do you ever wonder what is the root of all this?
Yeah, I think it starts. It's taught. I don't think it's something that just pops up. I don't think it's something that people just think, oh, I don't like that person because they're a different color than me. I think it's taught. I believe that it's a cycle that parents teach their kids, and that when that kid turns into a parent, they teach their kid. And I think it's a lot about breaking that cycle, showing the kids that no matter what color you are, what race you are, what gender you are, that you're no less human.
Beautiful. When you grow up to be a dad, you'll do that, won't you?
Yes, I will. If I ever do have kids, which I would like, I would never want them to discriminate based on race, based on color, based on orientation. That's my worst nightmare.
Last year was very important for all of us. As Canadians, we will always remember how throughout Canada, across the country, from the former residential school sites, we found so many unmarked graves. These graves belong to those Indigenous children who were forcibly sent to these schools, where they were denied the right to speak in their mother language. Their identity was stolen. We are delighted to announce that we will be honoring Jennifer Sheriff, an Indigenous educator, a wonderful woman who was instrumental behind orange shirt pins. These pins were made to give respect to those Indigenous children who died because of that brutal system.
Jennifer, you're most welcome in our program. Thank you for coming to our studios. I am wearing the badge that you made. It's a beautiful orange shirt. Can you tell me the story behind orange shirt?
So Phyllis Jack, her name was, when she went to school, was very excited to be going to school as a little girl. Her family, she wasn't aware of residential school and the implications. She just knew she was starting school, and her grandmother had given her a beautiful new orange blouse to wear. And when she got to school, it was immediately taken away from her. And she was given her uniform, she was given her number. Students in residential schools had either, well, both, a number they were given as well as a Christian name. So they were not allowed to go by their own names anymore. So that is why the orange and the orange shirt has become the symbol of our angels that were at residential school and how many we lost.
When we go back in history and look at the atrocities that have been done to children of First Nations, Indigenous people of this land or any other land for that matter, wherever the Europeans have gone and conquered, it's almost a similar history. But when you go back and open all those pages, is nothing but pain and anguish. How do you feel about that?
Sometimes I feel as though it's not my story to tell. I don't know if my grandparents attended school. My father is Native American. I have many friends that survived residential school. I have many friends who are intergenerational survivors, and so sometimes I feel like I have imposter syndrome when I'm sharing, with non-Indigenous community members what happened at these places. And I asked an elder once about this, and she said, no, go ahead and tell the stories. She said, our children need to know what happened. And so I almost feel like sometimes there's a misplaced anguish or sadness that I have, but it's humanity. And so I can't help but feeling this.
Every time we see the numbers growing of unmarked graves, whether you are Indigenous or not, it leaves a lasting impact on your soul. And for everyone to bring up the topics and talk about it and tell the story is important. And I think what you're doing is very important.
Thank you. I know there's a fear, with my Indigenous colleagues and friends that the conversations will stop happening, or that they taper off, or they dwindle after an announcement is made. There's talk around it when an announcement is made, and then there's sort of a worry that, given a few weeks, that will taper off, because that sort of did happen with the first major announcement. But with so many sites now popping up, if there's one positive that comes from it, it's that there is almost a constant conversation that keeps happening, because these peaks of finding, the unmarked graves keep coming up.
And I think if you continue talking about it, if you continue your campaign, you will help in everybody getting connected to it.
I hope so.
Yes.
I hope so.
We would like to present you with our award for Raise Your Hands Against Racism for this year. And we feel that you are doing the job of people who could not. You're speaking for those who could not tell their own story. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's an absolute honor. Thank you very much. It's beautiful. No, it's very meaningful. And sometimes the work can feel very thankless. And this is not, of course, why I do it, but it can get really, really tough. Sometimes, there's so much in our Indigenous communities that happen across Turtle Island. There's almost a numbness that comes with it, and sort of, it's I'm sure, a defense mechanism. Because
Yes.
I can't feel the full impact every single time. I can't allow myself to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. So you sort of develop this dissociation almost in the moment, and allow yourself to feel it later when there's time, or I don't know, maybe when we need to. But sometimes it will hit very, very hard. And the Williams Lake announcement hit me very, very hard.
But inherently, you're a strong person, so you will continue with this.
And that's the thing, right?
Yes.
We have to, and it's I think good to feel that pain, because
Sometimes.
it's it's memorializing and it's remembering.
And it helps you to continue with your work. Thank you.
And I love what I do. So thank you so much. Such an honor. But when times get tough, we have to remember we have so many wonderful allies that are doing the work. So I raise my hands in thanks to you, really.
Moving forward, it's now time to listen to a wonderful poem dedicated to those children by Sherry Duggal. Sherry Duggal is an amazing woman. She is a poet. She has done amazing videos to educate people against racism. So here she is with her wonderful poem dedicated to the children of the Indian residential school system.
Now you also write beautifully, and I understand that you've written a piece for the First Nations. We would be so pleased if you could read that for us.
Yes. Basically, yes, the indigenous graves that we found is part of the assimilation process that the government of Canada and the church kind of worked together to create this assimilation. So with more graves, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, we found more graves. So it wasn't an easy piece to write. I was crying while I wrote it. So I might get emotional. Beware. Okay? Beware, everyone. All right. It's called Forgotten Burial Grounds. Bulldozers, developers, pipelines on stolen land. And now you trespass the realm of my mind. There's nothing more to take. Invisible boundaries form maps, intertwined, and I become the embodiment of lines and curves that begin and stop at unknown destinations. I feel the weight of who I am, but can't tell hands from feet. And as you trace yourself onto me, fingerprints overlap to the point where I become a stranger to myself. But now, as I reclaim my shadow, I familiarize myself with the contours of that which is me. Oxygen filters through my silhouette, crossing borders, bringing back memories of lost lands that breathe without rules. I become naked with the truth and get light from the source. As the sun gleams in my mom and dad's eyes, I find myself amongst mountains, trees, and bodies of water that tell me I am home. I'm tied to my roots, and their love becomes a mirror where I can see myself. My parents revive me each time they say my name. My parents revive me each time they say my name. And each time I see the look on their faces, the quiver in their voices, I know I was born into a world in which we were meant to trust. Be safe, they said, as they sent me off to school. Be safe. I trusted them, and they trusted a system in which I was disposable. But this is me, and I'm just like you. Don't make me the other. Don't make me the other, afraid of who I am. Don't reduce me to a trend where we keep resisting, even if the only thing in front of us is the end. Each day brings us one step closer to death. And as a sameness consumes everything, I too lie under the remnants of forgotten burial grounds, yet to house the unborn. I too lie under the landscapes of whole forests. Of whole forests my ancestors wanted me to know. My ancestors wanted me to know, but I never got the chance to explore.
Thank you so much for taking time and talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Summer O'Donnell. I use they, them pronouns.
Okay, so they, them pronoun. Can you please explain that to me? For a person who is that old and have never used that before, what does it mean and why is it so significant?
My identity, my gender identity is non-binary. I don't stay on the binary for like male and female. I'm off of it, so I don't really have a gender, or at least that's my explanation for it. Pronouns are very important for trans people. For trans males, they use he, him. Sometimes they use he, they. You know, it's very different for everyone. But pronouns really help a person feel comfortable and safe.
Now, when you say comfortable and safe, this is something that has come out in the last, I would say, about 2 to 5 years, and it has caught on pretty fast. Has there been discrimination against people who would like to be called they, them?
Yeah, for sure. There's been a lot of discrimination against everyone in the LGBTQ community, trans people, you know, people who are just gay or anything. There's a lot of discrimination, and it's really sad. It's tragic, really.
Now, your background, can we talk a little bit about your background? Tell us where you come from and what is your heritage?
I'm not too knowledgeable about it, but I was born here in Canada, and I know that my great-great-great-grandma was native to Hawaii, and I know that there is Native heritage in my bloodline. I'm not too sure about specifics or anything, but I am Native Canadian.
That's fantastic. The best way of explaining it, right? When you come into a country, adopt a country, you become the citizens of that country. So you have to have your affiliation with that country, obviously. When you, as you're growing up, now you're what, in grade 12, 11?
11.
Grade 11. And you look at your life forward, where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
I really want to work in the foster system. I've been in foster care myself, and I know that it sucks. It feels lonely, and I know that there are foster parents who aren't very kind and not accepting. And if I were a foster parent, I would love the children and I would treat them with respect, and that's what they deserve.
Have you seen that not being done to children in foster care?
Yeah, I wasn't sure of my sexuality as a child because I was a child, but I know that my brother, he has ADHD. One of my foster parents was extremely rude towards him just because he had ADHD, which made him a little different than others, right? And it sucks to see that ableism in anywhere, really.
Do you feel that discrimination, racism, bullying comes out of ignorance?
Yeah, for sure. If you don't understand something, try to educate yourself and seek others to educate you. But if you're not understanding, it's hard to Sorry.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's hard to understand, but it's hard to explain, and there's so much in this world that can't be explained.
So if I ask you to go back a little bit and look at the world standing here right now, what is wrong with it?
A lot. There's a lot wrong with the world. There's a lot of classism, racism, sexism, ableism. There's so much, and we really have to work towards trying to change it. And that really comes from systematic stuff, the justice system and all that. And it's really hard to change that when you're not in power. So we need people in power to change it.
Do you see that happening?
Slowly. I don't see too much of it, but I do see some people in power working towards it. I heard Elon Musk did something to help people in Ukraine. I heard he helped give them Wi-Fi, which is really good so that they're able to spread news or reach out for help or anything, right? So with things like that, I'm like happy to see that, but there's not enough. There needs to be more.
What do you want to do?
I want to become a foster parent or a social worker or work with children and help fight injustice.
And I wish you all the best. When you see someone being discriminated against or being bullied, do you stand up?
I try to, for sure. For sure.
Have you been hurt?
Yeah, I've been called the D slur in Spanish class. It was not very fun, but at that time I was afraid to fight back, so I just stayed silent. But now I can't stand for it. I fight back.
With that, we come to the end of our event. Special thanks to everyone who has participated, especially L.A. Matheson Secondary School students and Ohana, our award recipients and Group PG. We'll see you next year.